Far out to sea, something goes horribly wrong. It can be a crossed wire that ignites a fire, an unexplained attack by submarine or anti-ship missile, a sudden and unexplainable blast deep in a ship's belly. Or as in the case of the USS Forrestal, it could be a stray rocket causing an accidental explosion. It is hard to imagine a more hostile environment in which to confront an emergency than a modern warship. At sea, there is no place to run, nowhere to hide, no one to turn to for help. On a warship in trouble, there is no choice but to stand and fight. May 17, 1987. An Iranian fighter jet launches 2 Exocet missiles at the U.S. frigate Stark. Early warning systems aboard the Stark and nearby aircraft fail to alert the ship, and all defensive efforts come too late.
When the first missile hit, I wasn't exactly sure what had happened, and then I was up on top of the ship above the bridge. Then I stood up, and another person with me, the lookout, told me what it was. I saw the second one coming, and it's pretty terrifying.
One missile ripped a 10 by 15-foot hole in the hull, stopping fatefully in the crew's sleeping quarters. The other sliced through the superstructure of the ship. 37 crew members lost their lives.
The hazards to our men and women in uniform in the defense of freedom can never be understated. The officers and crew of the USS Stark deserve our highest admiration and appreciation.
Though crewmen did an admirable job keeping the ship afloat, the fire brought to light serious deficiencies in basic damage control preparedness. Doors and hatches that should have been watertight weren't. Hoses that should have worked didn't. For the Navy, it was a lesson hard learned.
I can't tell you how important it is. Until something like that happens, you never realize how important it is to understand what's going on, what to do, what you need to use.
By their very nature, Navy ships are potentially hazardous places. Chemicals and structural materials kept safely distant in the civilian world are common on warships. Jet fuel, ammunition, and high-voltage electrical systems are jammed into tiny spaces with living quarters. And the last place in the world you want to fire is near a nuclear propulsion plant. Sailors not only have to be technical experts in their particular jobs, they have to be amateur chemists as well. They have to know and avoid elemental chains of events that can start a fire, and if the fire starts, what chemical combination can put it out. When a fire breaks out aboard ship, the first problem becomes identifying what type of fire it is. This Navy training film teaches sailors the proper way to identify and fight a fire. Class A fires involve solid substances, wood, cloth, paper, or things that usually leave an ash. Class B fires involve flammable liquids, the lubricants, fuels, and paint found on every Navy ship. Class C fires are fires in electronic or electrical equipment. Finally, Class D fires involve combustible metals like magnesium and sodium, which are used in certain parts of aircraft and missiles. Some of the chemicals used to extinguish shipboard fires can be as hazardous as the flame itself. Carbon dioxide, or CO2, dilutes the oxygen content of the air, literally starving the fire, but it also displaces the oxygen in human lungs. Without proper protective equipment, a firefighter can suffocate in a matter of minutes. An oxygen breathing apparatus, or OBA, is standard equipment for any shipboard firefighter.
Now, the system configurations can vary, again, on...
Classroom training teaches beginning firefighters the proper way to use the gear.
If you're holding this handle right here, especially if you don't have any protective gloves on, what could happen to you? You can get the frostbite, all right? It's just like sticking your tongue on the pole outside in the winter. Now, you pull it off, you're going to be missing some skin.
On the infirmary, general quarters, all hands, man, general
Heads crammed with images from firefighting training films and manuals, the students can now put their knowledge to the test.
Pull straight out. Take nice.
Pull what up?
You got a cotter pin right here.
The first challenge comes in trying to sort out the protective gear. Firefighting schools run drill after drill, timing how quickly a team can react and put out a fire. Firefighting students train with the same gear that they'll find aboard ship. They'll also get their hands on the latest firefighting technology. Using this thermal imaging camera, fire investigators can quickly identify the main source of heat. In search and rescue efforts, the camera can pick out the silhouette of a body that's otherwise obscured by smoke and flames. Fighting fires is not for the weak. Extreme heat, bulky protective clothing, and heavy equipment can exhaust even the strongest firefighter. Sailors who have fought real shipboard fires say while this kind of training helps, nothing can prepare you for the real thing.
When you're training, it's always so easy, you know, you run in, you do what you're supposed to do, and the fire's out. And in this case, it was so long. I mean, for 15 hours, we didn't even know if the fire was under control. And it was so hot. I mean, I never imagined it would be that bad.
The training continues even after the sailors graduate and report to their ship. Here, firefighters are in their element. They learn exactly where to go and what to do in case of a fire on that particular ship. Firefighting drills respect no sleep or work schedules. Soon, quick reactions become automatic. The protective gear goes on by rote, and crew members head for an imaginary fire. Sure, they may look and even feel a little silly fighting a fire that doesn't exist. But this kind of practice has paid big dividends during a real crisis. May 1990. A boiler room fire aboard the guided missile destroyer Cunningham sweeps through the bridge and combat information center, consuming everything in its path. An electrical fire burning at welding torch intensity. It takes 2 hours to extinguish the blaze, even with a quick response. The fire caused hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage. 12 men were severely burned. 1 man died. April 15th, 1988, the Persian Gulf. The crippled frigate Samuel B. Roberts is towed to port for repairs after being hit by a submerged Iranian contact mine. She is listing badly, riding very low in the water, but after what took place over the past 30 hours, it was no small miracle that she was even afloat.
Everyone was more or less caught unaware that we were actually over a mine. We didn't even know it was there. And next thing we know, everyone's up in the air and up against the wall somewhere.
The mine blew a 20-foot hole in the Roberts hull, flooding her main engine rooms and snapping her keel.
We got our repair parties together. We dewatered the ship in the spaces that were flooding. We set flooding boundaries and stopped the progressive flooding. And more importantly, we went in and we fought the fire until we put the fire out.
Damage control efforts are still underway as the ship is towed back to port. Exhausted crew members grab sleep when and where they can.
The story that has unfolded here, I believe, in the last 30 hours has been a story of a ship that refused to die.
The key to keeping any ship afloat is maintaining what's called watertight integrity, meaning that if you can't stop the flooding in a space, close it off to keep it from spreading to the rest of the ship. The ship might sustain a great deal of damage, but with proper watertight integrity, the ship will remain afloat. The best way to teach a sailor how to plug holes in a ship is to let him get his feet wet. This wet trainer simulates about the same damage a ship would suffer if it were to be hit by a high explosive projectile, creating the same chaotic atmosphere that a crew member may encounter for real. Swift rising water motivates the team to repair the damage before the trainer completely fills with water. The teams have to be entrepreneurs as they use whatever tools they can find to stop the onslaught of water. As critical as firefighting and damage control lessons are in the surface fleet, consider the intensity of the training for submarines. April 10, 1963. The submarine USS Thresher is conducting sea trials off Cape Cod when the boat begins to flood. Main propulsion goes offline and the boat is unable to make an emergency blow to the surface. Within minutes, the Thresher plunges to the ocean floor, an 8,500-foot drop. 129 men were killed. Their deaths serve as tragic echoes of one fact. If you're submerged, there's nowhere to go in an emergency. You can't even jump off the ship. The only thing standing between you and the deadly crush of water is a thin wall of steel. Submariners who take survival seriously take damage control seriously.
I think it's easy to forget after almost 100 years of submarines and 40 of that nuclear submarines, that it really is still a very dangerous business. It's a big ocean out there. It's very powerful and destructive, and every day you can read in the paper of people and ships who didn't treat that ocean with the respect it deserved and suffer the consequences.
The damage control trainer reflects the differences between surface ships and submarines. Passageways are narrow and cramped. The water level rises at a more alarming rate. Instructors sit in a dark observation room manipulating the platform to simulate real submarine movement, so students struggle to keep their footing.
Rolling starboard.
The more real, the more intense the situation is, the better.
Oh, good job, it just stopped.
On a real ship during a real emergency, one area is designated as Damage Control Central. DC Central prioritizes and coordinates damage control efforts for the entire ship.
Because they need 2 people to work that leak.
In the trainer, this is DC Central. Instructors monitor the chaos, judging the skill and progress of every student. But they also serve as masters of disaster, dishing out bad news as the trainees work. Just as the crew thinks they've got the flooding under control, a flick of a switch creates another terrifying challenge. Communication is vital. DC Central's link to the flood scene is the phone talker, an enlisted man whose sole job is managing emergency communications. Using special phones that are powered by the human voice, the talker must make sense out of madness and clearly communicate the progress of repairs. As the scenarios get tougher, the now seasoned students gain confidence and react more quickly. They are trained so that in a real emergency, their instincts will not be fear, but fight. If you're faced with a sinking ship, There's no time to look in a book for instructions.
Lessons that I've learned over the years in damage control are foremost that you practice and you practice and you practice. You must train, and you do so on a daily basis.
February 18, 1991. The amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli, sitting 50 miles off Kuwait, drifts into a moored contact mine.
A lot of people were in their racks asleep. In fact, most of the crew was. The explosion was very loud, woke everybody up, and immediately after that, general quarters was sounded. What I expected to find after that was a lot of confusion, people running around and stuff like that, but what I did find is a lot of training paid off. Everybody was moving to their general quarters station. They were moving in an orderly fashion. I got to my GQ station in DC Central. People were manning the phones, communications was going well, and we were getting a good picture of what was going on.
As in any accident, people go into shock. That's when training pays off. Rather than freezing, they go on autopilot. Their actions become automatic. They don't need to think, they just react.
At first I thought I was dead, but saw myself walking and I could smell the fumes and everything, so I figured I was still alive, so just started walking out.
Not until the Tripoli was safely in dry dock did the crew get a good look at the extent of the damage. There was a 16 by 25-foot hole in the hull. Saturday, July 29, 1967. USS Forrestal is operating off the coast of North Vietnam when flight deck cameras record one of the worst shipboard fires in naval history. Somehow, a rocket is triggered and slams into an A-4 Skyhawk. The sheet of flame from the A-4's ruptured fuel tanks envelops the Skyhawk and her immediate neighbors. Behind the curtain of smoke, 2 1,000-pound bombs drop from the aircraft's wings onto the carrier deck. As bombs begin to explode, the main fire parties are virtually wiped out. The inferno rages completely out of control. The bombs blow huge holes in the flight deck, and fuel streams below decks with fire following not far behind. Once the explosions stop, makeshift fire teams return to the flight deck. They lay down a curtain of protective foam to keep the fire at bay. No sacrifice is too great to keep the fire from spreading across the flight deck. Many firefighters trapped between the fire and the edge of the deck have no choice but to take their chances in the water. Makeshift hose teams valiantly battle the blaze, but untrained sailors make well-intentioned but disastrous mistakes. Water hose teams wash away blankets of protective firefighting foam, and the fire once again begins to spread. Days after the fire, observers remarked that some firefighting teams seemed to be using water for water's sake. If they found an open hole caused by a bomb, they just kept pouring water in it. As a result, the Forrestal suffered thousands of dollars in damage to onboard computers, which weren't directly threatened by the fire. Some firefighters battled the blaze without proper protective gear. A fuel tank explosion, no matter how small, would have burned those shirtless firefighters to a crisp. Untrained sailors mishandled unexploded ordnance, kicking it across the flight deck with their feet. Inexperienced firefighters struggle with unfamiliar safety equipment. Many times they have to stop and read the instructions. Sailors trapped by fires below the flight deck die because they had never bothered to learn alternate escape routes. The flight deck fire was extinguished within several hours, but it took another day to put out the fires inside the ship. In the end, 134 crewmen died, and damage to the ship, not including lost aircraft, totaled $72 million. While lack of training wasn't to blame for all the casualties, the lesson written in blood would not be forgotten. The deadliest enemy in the face of a shipboard fire is ignorance. To this day, films of the Forrestal fire are shown to naval recruits. It is a cautionary tale, a warning that will stay with them always. and a reminder that danger aboard ship is unlike danger anywhere else. If they are going to be able to protect their country, they have to know how to protect themselves first.